Chapter 5 War. Colonists from New England began gathering outside Boston. Their goal was to run the British out of the city. About 10,000 patriots arrived to fight the British. On the night of June 16th, 1775, a group of patriots climbed Breed's Hill. They were led by Colonel William Prescott. Breed's Hill stood across the river from Boston. They planned to build a fort on top of the hill. The men worked throughout the night. The next morning, the British saw a fort had gone up overnight. Warships began shelling the fort. British soldiers crossed the river to destroy it. There were 2,500 British troops at the battle, almost twice as many as the Patriots. The British started to climb up Breed's Hill, but their heavy weapons and packs slowed them down. "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes!" Colonel Prescott yelled to his men. The Patriots quietly watched and waited. When the British came closer, the colonists began to fire. They fought bravely. Twice they drove the British back. The third time the colonists ran out of bullets. They had to use their muskets as clubs. Soon they were forced to retreat. And even though it's called the Battle of Bunker Hill, it was fought on Breed's Hill. The battle was over. The British suffered many losses. They had won the battle, but they were trapped in Boston. Washington in command. In July 1775, the Continental Congress appointed George Washington to lead the colonial army. Washington was 6 feet 2 inches tall. He was a fine athlete with a commanding presence. Washington owned a plantation in Virginia called Mount Vernon. He had fought bravely in the French and Indian Wars. People admired his strength and courage. Washington's army was called the Continental Army. Washington traveled to Boston. He found a ragtag group of men waiting for him. They had come from all over the 13 colonies. Many worked as farmers, teachers, fishermen, or merchants. Most had little training for war. They didn't have uniforms. Almost all of them brought their own guns. Some brought their wives to cook and care for them. Some even brought their dogs. British retreat from Boston. Washington needed cannons to defeat the British. In December 1775, he asked a young soldier named Henry Knox to travel to Fort Ticonderoga in northern New York. Americans had captured British cannons there. Henry's job was to haul the cannons nearly 300 miles back to Boston. Boys as young as 12 signed on as cooks, helpers, and drummers. Henry began working in a bookstore when he was a young boy. Henry and some other men left for the long journey to the north. At Fort Ticonderoga, they loaded 59 cannons onto sleds. Teams of oxen pulled the heavy loads. Snowy, rough roads lay ahead. But 56 days later, Henry and the cannons arrived in Boston. Farmers along the way helped Henry. Washington ordered his men to drag the cannons up a hill. The hill overlooked Boston. Oh man, these cannons were so heavy. It was like pulling a car. When the British spotted the cannons, they panicked. They left Boston in March of 1776. Turn the page to find out our favorite flags of the American Revolution. Our favorite flags. There was no official flag during colonial times. Many different flags flew over the colonies. Here are some of the most popular. The Grand Union flag. George Washington used this flag in January of 1776. It was the first flag of the United States. Then there's the rattlesnake flag. Some colonists used this flag to show they weren't afraid of the British. Next, we have George Washington's headquarters flag. This is the one that you see on the right side with all the stars. General Washington flew this flag over his headquarters throughout the war. And then our last flag is called the First Stars and Stripes. I'll read about it now, but it's on the next picture. It says in 1777, Congress adopted a flag with 13 stars and stripes as the flag of the United States. They represented the 13 colonies.